Welcome back to the channel, my brothers, or if this is your first time, welcome to the channel. My name's Andy R, and this is the Brotherhood of Men. Is the baby mine? Am I the father? In today's society, these are questions men are asking more and more. And unfortunately in today's society, the answer is often coming back as no. So let's get into the video. So as I said, more and more men in today's society are asking the same question. When a partner of theirs who they have a sexual relationship with is coming to them and saying, "Hey sweetheart, we're pregnant," meaning she's pregnant. And more men are asking the question, is the baby mine? Am I the father? And more men are finding out that no, they're not the father. Now, before I get into depth with this discussion, with this video, you, my brothers out there, I want you to do me a small favour. If you're already subscribed to this channel, could you please check to make sure you still are subscribed and haven't been unsubscribed without your knowledge? Because something very weird is going on in my analytics just recently in the last couple of weeks, and I have a suspicion that that's something that's happening. Now, if you check and you find out you're not subscribed, you have been unsubscribed from this channel, please leave it down in the comments, let me know so that I can use that going forward. Anyway, back to the subject. I did a video a while back about an article that appeared in the Evening Standard, the Manchester Evening Standard, that said the statistics from a paternity clinic showed that nearly 50% of men were finding out that they weren't the father of a child that they had been rearing, taking care of financially and emotionally, and bonded with. Now, that was a skewed statistic, because if you look at that from what I've just said, that it's men who went to a paternity clinic. So they already had doubts in their mind that something wasn't right and that they may or may not be the father. Something had gone on in their life. Maybe it was the behaviour of their partner, the woman they were with in the marriage or living together, whatever. But enough doubt was raised in their mind that they went for a paternity test. So nearly 50% of the men who went for that paternity test had justified fears to go for that paternity test because it showed that they weren't the father. Now, that isn't to say, and I'm not claiming at all because it would be nonsense, that 50% of men, 1 in every 2, are raising a child that isn't theirs. That would be nonsense. Like I said, the results, although they were accurate, were for a paternity clinic. They were the results. But it got me to thinking, how relevant and how prevalent is a statistic of men raising children that are not theirs? Men that believe it is their child, not somebody who's taken on a single mother, foolish that he'd be to do that, but somebody who's in a sexual relationship with a woman, she gets pregnant, she never tells him any different than it is your child. He accepts that it is his child because he's very trusting, and then later down the line finds out that he has been raising a child that isn't biologically his. So in marriage, living together, engaged, just in a stable relationship together, and finding out that the child he believed was his and was told no different by the woman he was with turns out not to be his. How often does that ask? Well, I was able to find out quite a bit of research on this, and it varies depending on what research you look at. But it said as many or as high as 10% of men are raising children, believing them to be their children, but are not biologically theirs. Now, Those figures are a little bit vague, and I say 10% because I could find research that said 3% and research that was as high as 33%. I disproved, or should I say I discounted, the 33% figure for the simple reason that the metrics that were done in raising that survey I found very questionable. But I thought that the 10% was quite a believable figure. Now, when you think about it, you're saying 10%, it doesn't sound too high. If a doctor gave you a diagnosis of an illness and said, we can operate on you and there's a 90% chance of success, you would happily take those odds. 90% is good. But if somebody said to you, 1 in 10 men are raising a child that biologically isn't theirs, but they believe to be theirs, all of a sudden 90% doesn't seem very good. Men want 100% certainty when it comes to this subject, and rightly so, because you are giving your time, your effort, your finances, your love, all of your resources to protect a child you believe is yours, and absolutely do that. That is what you're supposed to do as a man. You are supposed to protect that which is yours. But then some time down the line, you find out that you've spent all of that time bonding, correcting, nurturing a child that turns out not to be yours. That's got to be heartbreaking. That is the biggest kick in the guts I could ever imagine happening to a man. And I have had friends this happened to. If you saw my previous video, I told a story about a friend of mine. But it's also the most disgusting, disrespectful, dishonest and downright dirty thing a woman can ever do to a man. Pass off another man's child as his. It is disgraceful, and it's happening more and more. Now, you could say that, well, if he gets his name on the birth certificate as the father, which he does, because he believes it's his, so he happily signs the birth certificate, surely that's paternity fraud. Surely the woman then can get prosecuted and sued for knowingly allowing a man to take responsibility for a child she knows isn't his. Well, the simple fact is we've got these double standards going on in our court systems where women are defended and women are forgiven. The simple fact is that women are very, very rarely taken to court for paternity fraud. She only has to turn around and say, well, I didn't know it wasn't his. So therefore, no intent, because the law does tend to rely on intent, you intended to do something. Therefore, I didn't intend to deceive him. Therefore, it isn't fraud because I didn't know. And ridiculously enough, the courts allow this argument. There was no intent to defraud, therefore there was no fraud. But the truth of the matter is that they never take the true story into consideration when making these decisions. And that is, the woman damn well knew she was sleeping with another man other than her husband or partner or fiancé, whichever. She was in a sexual relationship with more than one man, and she knew that at the time that she got pregnant. So she knew, without anybody having to do any brain work or leg work, that there was a possibility that he wasn't going to be the father. Even if it was a slim one, even if she only slept with this guy twice, there is still a possibility that it could happen. But at no time did she step forward and say, by the way, I slept with another guy. At no time did she come forward and say, there might be a chance that you're not the father, and we should have a DNA test done when he's born, or even a fetal DNA test done in the womb, which can be done now and isn't as invasive as it was quite a few years ago. Answering the question even before the child is born, so at least a man can make an informed choice. But she didn't. She kept her mouth shut and she palmed off this child as his. He bonded with that child, as a father does. He helped raise that child, as a father does. He protected that child, as a father does. And he spent time, effort and money on that child, as a father does. That's what we do as men. We are so defensive of our children, of our offspring, of our progeny. It's fierce how much men love their kids. But she never gave him the opportunity to understand that it might not even be his child, whilst knowing that she did have a sexual relationship with another man at the time of conception. But the courts accept that she didn't know. There was no intent. And this is why so few, well, in actual fact, in England, there hasn't been a case of a woman being sued for paternity fraud since 2008, almost 20 years ago. So almost 20 years ago was the last time. And before that, well, I couldn't find out. The truth be told, I didn't look that deep, but I wanted to know the last case that there was of a woman being taken to court for paternity fraud. You see, what you have to understand about fraud is that if a fraud is committed, anything that follows from that fraud is instantly cancelled. So if a woman told you she was pregnant and it's your baby, and you did the traditional thing of stepping up and marrying her so that the child had a married mother and father at the time of birth, if you could prove that she committed that fraud at the time because she knew that she was sleeping with somebody else, and there was a possibility that somebody else was in the running of the name father, you get that, all of a sudden everything's cancelled out. She has no rights within the marriage because the marriage never happened, because the fraud happened before the marriage. Do you see? At the time of fraud, everything that's proven that it is a fraud after that is cancelled, it's negated. It's a Maximin law that is as old as time almost. Fraud cancels everything. And that's why women, once again, by the court systems, are being defended and protected from that reality. There's also the financial costs it takes to raise a child. A man can spend, well, actually a recent survey, and this is in pounds, so it'll be a little bit more in the US and about the same in euros, etc. In dollars, sorry, it'll be quite a bit more because there's more, the pound buys more dollar. But it was shown that raising a child from birth to adulthood, to adulthood, 18 years old, and also men also provide beyond 18, but from birth to 18 cost roughly £150,000. So in dollars that's going to be roughly $200,000 plus. Euros it's going to be around 150,000 euros, etc. But this is to show you the financial cost, and that usually is a burden that's carried by men more than women. In a lot of relationships, men bring in about 70% or are responsible for 70% of the bills, etc. And women bring in and contribute about 30%. So there's a real incentive for a woman who has somebody in her life who she can rely on to tell him this is her child. All he's become to her then is a bankroll and a backup plan. Now, 1 in 10 men are finding out that they are not the father. The baby wasn't theirs. Let me put that into perspective for you. In the United Kingdom last year, 2021, the live birth statistic was that 680,000 live births, 680,000, it was a bit over that, but 680,000 children were born last year in 2021. 10% of that is 68,000 children, not a small insignificant number. So 68,000 children are being raised by a man who thinks the child's his, but isn't. Now, you think to yourself, 68,000, okay, 10%. That's only last year's birth statistic. Let's go back and add up all of birth certificate statistics for, say, the last 5 years, because men rarely find out they're not the father in year one. Let's look at those same statistics for the United States of America. A lot higher population than Great Britain or the United Kingdom by a magnitude of many amounts. 300,000 people live in the United States. So last year, 2021, 3.6 million children were born, live births. That's how it's phrased, live births. So 3.6 million babies were born last year in the United States. 10% of that is 360,000 children. 360,000 children whose father thinks it's theirs and biologically it's not, because the woman cheated. And there is no other way to say this than the woman cheated. She was in a stable sexual relationship with a man and willingly went out and slept with another man, got pregnant in that time period, giving doubt to who was the child's father, and chose the man she had as the backup plan. The man she decided was the more stable man was going to take responsibility of being the father, whether it was that child's father or not. That is despicable. It's the lowest, low down, disgraceful, despicable thing a woman can ever do to a man. It is the very definition of the word cuckold, where a cuckoo lays its eggs in another bird's nest, kills all of those chicks so it's the only chick left, and then is raised by adopted parents. In other words, the reed warbler raises this chick thinking it's its own chick. All of the resources go into that which is not theirs. No biological connection at all. And this is what's happening more and more in today's society to men out there. So it's not a surprise that 50% of men who had doubts and went to a fertility clinic found out their doubts were justified and they were not the father. But that means there's a heck of a lot more men out there thinking they're raising a child that is theirs. Now, obvious clues. If the baby is born with facial features that are not genetically of the male's race, they're dead giveaways. If it comes out looking more Asian than he is, it's like, hang on a minute. If it comes out with a darker skin, he's like, hang on a minute. Those are dead giveaways. But if the woman has cheated with a guy who's of the same demographic as those two, and the baby's born, there won't be those obvious markers, those obvious giveaways, without actually having to do a DNA test. So why do we not have mandatory DNA tests at birth, paternity tests at birth? Not just DNA tests, but paternity tests. For the simple reason that I think the figure was going to end up to be a lot more than 10%. In fact, those states and countries that have tried to introduce mandatory paternity tests onto their books have been shouted down by lobby groups, the most vocal of those being the feminists. Women's lobby groups, not necessarily feminists, just women's lobby groups, shouting them down. Why? Surely you'd want to know without a shadow of a doubt that that child is not only hers, which she knows it is, but also her husband's or partner or fiancé or the woman that she wants to be with, who's living with her. So why argue against it? I think we know why. The morality in today's society has dropped so low that women will actually fight to keep a man in the dark. We are being treated like cash cows. We are being treated like emotional sponges. Let me sponge emotions, finances, resources from you for any child that I give birth to, whether it's yours or not. But I'm going to tell it's yours, because if it ever goes to court, I just go, well, I didn't know. Yeah, but you did know that you were sleeping with more than one man and you never said that. That's intent. That's why, if the fraud was proven, the man could regain at least financially. You see, he's given all of that finances to that child. He could claim that back from the mother. She committed fraud upon him. He could claim that back. He could also then claim a similar amount from the real father, if it could be found out where the real father was or who it was. But he isn't given those opportunities, because the court instantly turns round and says, well, she didn't do it on purpose. And you've been doing such a sterling job of being that child's father, we're going to allow you to carry on paying for it. That's the second kick in the teeth for a man. When he does find out that he's not the child's father, goes to court for a divorce or whatever, the court says, you've been in that child's life long enough now that that child thinks you're its father, so you have that role and you carry on paying. No justice for men in the justice system. So I would say to any of my brothers out there, any woman comes up to you and says, I'm pregnant and it's yours, I would say the very same thing. We're going to have a DNA test done when it's born. I believe you. If it's somebody you lives with or somebody you care enough about and you hadn't got any doubts about, you still say, I believe you. But just to take away any minor concerns I might have, we're going to have a paternity test when it's born. If she objects at all in the slightest way, there's a red flag for you. There's alarm bells that should be going on in your head. She should just say, yeah, absolutely. Just to put your mind at rest, that's fine. She might feel a little bit of resentment for you even saying that because of the implication of what you're saying. But the truth of the matter is that she probably is only going to argue if she's got something to hide. If it's all brings up any objection, your first question has got to be, why are you so against this? Why are you objecting so much to a paternity test? Because if we don't stay together, you're going to need that paternity test to take to court so that I'm forced to pay child support. And that's the other thing, why we should have paternity tests at birth. It takes out of the equation any doubt. So if it comes to the divorce courts and the man says, well, I'm not even sure the baby's mine, well, you need to pay for a paternity test. If that was done at the time of birth, there would no longer need be a paternity test later. It's already a decided case. Now that brings me to another part of the subject, the fact that men are far more trusting than women in relationships. Now, again, all of these statistics, all of these facts, all of these insights I'm giving you does not apply to all women, obviously. It doesn't apply to all men. I mean, I've already shown that it's as high as 10% of men who might be going through this. And I showed you a figure of 3.6 million in the United States. Well, that's only for last year. And like I said, it can be years down the line that a man finds out that he isn't the father. So he's already had years to bond with a child that is then quite literally yanked away from him. A bereavement with somebody who's still alive. It crushes men. I have read stories, seen statements of men, and even in my own personal life, as I said about a friend who went through this, it crushed him. He recovered from it, luckily, but at the time, it literally crushed him. I feared for his life. That's how serious it was. But, as I say, men are more trusting than women in relationships, especially when it comes to birth, when it comes to children. Because they have to be. You see, when a woman gives birth, she never thinks to herself, Is this my baby? Well, of course she knows it's her baby. She just pushed a whole human being out of her body. She knows that that baby she pushed out is hers. Biologically, it's her child. She has no doubt. A man has to take it on faith that it's his child. He has to trust his sexual partner enough to accept that that child is mine. He has to trust 100%. And those who don't trust 100%, those who don't believe that any fears that they might have are unfounded, go and get a paternity test. More and more men are finding out that they have been sold a bill of goods that is a lemon. They are finding they have been, that fraud has been committed upon them. But they're also finding that they have very little recourse in the legal system for that fraud that is being wrought upon them. And this is waking up a lot more men than my videos are. They're realising that so much is stacked against men that they are walking away from serious long-term relationships. They will still have sex with women. And if you do, men, don't forget, condom up. Because there's a lot more nasty things that can happen to you if you don't, other than getting a woman pregnant. So make sure every time you carry them and you use them every single time, because if you don't, you are going to be the arbiter of your own doom. Wear them, carry them, don't rely on anybody else. Don't rely on her condoms, you don't know what she's done to them. Take them away when you're finished, just like that NBA coach said to his players. Wear a condom and take it away with you when you leave. Don't throw it in the rubbish bin. Don't try and flush it down the toilet. Because there were stories of women hooking those out and self-inseminating themselves with those condoms. And then the man was on the line because when the DNA test was done, it was showing that the child was his and he was in for a heck of a lot of child support and maintenance. So, as I said, my brothers, you take care of yourself. When I say this at the end of each video, it's because I know the pitfalls that are out there. I've read enough, seen enough statistics to know what you are facing. I'm of an older generation. This is an old head talking to young heads. I'm of an older generation where these things aren't quite as prevalent in my life. But that doesn't mean I don't care about you out there and don't want you to be made a fool of. We are living in clown world, but that doesn't mean you have to be. As I said at the beginning, if you are already subscribed, please check to see that that box is black still. Is gone from black to white, and that you are still subscribed, because I have a nasty feeling that some of my brothers out there are being unsubscribed without their knowledge. So please, if you are already a subscriber to this channel, just check that you are still subscribed. And if you have been cancelled like that, taken away from that subscription, please leave it in a comment down below so that I can, well, not necessarily do something about it, but at least I know what's going on, because something's been really weird over the last couple of weeks on my showing on my analytics. Anyway, if you're not already subscribed, hit the subscribe button, come in, become a brother. Don't forget to hit the bell notification, that way you don't miss out on future content. And at the very least, everybody, give the video a like. I hope that you've got something from this video. I hope you've got some insight and some knowledge moving forward. I hope that you use that knowledge to help brothers that you come across in the real world. Pass on the message. Anyway, I'm going for a cup of tea because, well, I think I've earned one. You, my brothers out there, like I always say, take care of yourself, because if you don't, who will? And I'll talk to you soon. Bye now.